Good afternoon. This is George Yates. We're here with Justice for All, and it's another lovely day. You know, I've been on the air now for several weeks with this show, and it's been a lot of fun, and it seems like every day I take this drive out here from Virginia Beach, and it's a lovely, beautiful day. I hope everybody out there is headed for the beach or headed somewhere where they can spend some time out in the sunshine. It's beautiful. Today we have a guest who is somewhat not as famous as he might want to be, because he is what they call the original whistleblower. His name is William Binney. He was a NSA code maker for 36 years, and after 9/11, he resigned from the NSA because he protested the gathering of intelligence on American citizens. It created problems for him, and he left the NSA and then tried to report what he believed were unconstitutional activities by the United States government in spying on its own citizens. And he created problems for the government, and the government created problems for him. And he's with us today, and he has a lot of information about, of course, a lot of us know about Mr. Edward Snowden, who exposed a lot of the spying activities of the NSA in recent years. And Mr. Binney, I guess my first question is Edward Snowden a patriot, or is he a traitor?
Well, I consider him to be someone who's done a public service mostly for the people of the United States, but also for the people of the world. I mean, what he's exposed are the dangers to democracy. I mean, this is the greatest danger to democracy since the Civil War.
You know, you tried to go through proper channels. You were an employee of the National Security Agency. I've been calling that the NSA. For those folks out there, this is the National Security Agency, which is the agency responsible for gathering information for counterterrorism. You took proper channels. You were an employee of the government. You didn't take classified information with you. You didn't report classified information to the press, as Mr. Snowden did. You went through proper channels, correct?
Yes, that's right. We went through the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, the Inspector Generals of the Department of Defense and the Department of Justice, and members of Congress as well.
Tell me about your background and what brought you to the point where you had to blow the whistle. And I know that's a rather long monologue for you, but I know our listeners would like to know who William Binney is and why your activities are important to what's going on today.
Yeah, well, that is a long story. I'll try to keep it short here, though. I worked for the better part of 30 years trying to solve code systems and cipher systems and data systems, focused on the threat of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. So that my primary focus was in that area for that period of time. And I did various things like solve any number of code systems and deal with cipher systems and data systems, and it was a very interesting, productive job that was basically the charter of NSA, which was foreign intelligence, not domestic intelligence. In fact, the FISA laws were put in place back in the 1970s to ensure that NSA did not do domestic intelligence.
What are the FISA laws?
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court Act in 1978 was written after the Church Committee investigation into NSA, CIA, and FBI, and their unconstitutional acts against U.S. citizens during the Nixon administration, late 60s, early 70s. And it was basically they were spying on people who were opposed to the Vietnam War and others who didn't agree with the administration. People like Martin Luther King and John Lennon, and those were some of the more prominent members that they were spying on. And so when they got caught at that, they were in direct violation of the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments of the Constitution, as well as any number of laws. And so that's why the Church Committee initiated the FISA Amendments Act of 1978. That created the Senate and House Intelligence Committees as means of oversight of the agencies of the intelligence community to make sure that they did not spy on U.S. citizens. They also created the FISA court, the FISC, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, and they chartered them to issue warrants. In other words, the FISA Amendments Act said that the only way you can spy on U.S. citizens is to have a court warrant issued by the FISA court. So, in other words, if they wanted to spy on U.S. citizens, they had to have a direct warrant signed by a judge on that court.
And while you were working for the NSA, that rule, and that was what, Frank Church, was that his name, the former senator?
Yes, he was the head of that investigation. Yeah.
And there were a lot of people at that time that were actually opposed to Frank Church's crusade during that time, right? They said that this is going to compromise national security. Even then, that wasn't exactly universally accepted, was it?
No, it wasn't. In fact, it's only recently come out that they were actually at the time spying on Frank Church.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even then they kept it away from the committee. Okay, so they didn't tell the whole truth to that committee at the time.
Well, hasn't domestic spying been going on forever? I mean, don't we know about, not that it's right or wrong, but, wasn't J. Edgar Hoover spying on Americans way back?
Yes.
That's sort of...
Oh, yeah, that's right. He had leverage on everybody in Congress and everybody. That's why he was able to stay the head of the FBI for so long, almost 30-some years, I think.
Well, so what's so different about this, Bill? I mean, I think Americans, I guess, have grown kind of accustomed to this, even... I guess we're somewhat acceptant of it, aren't we? Aren't there a lot of people out there now that are saying, well, if the government's spying on me, I guess that needs to happen because they're protecting me, and a lot of people agree with that. So
yeah, well, that's a red herring. That's a false issue. That's not the issue. That's not why they're collecting this data.
What are they? Why are they collecting it, in your opinion?
They're collecting it for law enforcement. The FBI and the DEA, they're the ones who are using this data and going into it and using it to arrest people. That's the real problem. That's the real problem I see.
Well, can a citizen then go back and challenge then the search or challenge the acquisition of this data later? Can't a lawyer come in and later on challenge it based upon a violation of Fourth Amendment? No.
Yes, that's right. It's also the violation of the Fifth Amendment. They use that data to testify against. So it's like using your words to testify against you. And if you acquire that unconstitutionally, that is without a warrant, then it's not admissible in court. And yet, so what they do is, and this is the problem I really had with it all along, is they've provided this data to law enforcement, and then law enforcement has set up a whole procedure now where they do what they call like parallel construction. That means first of all, they know from NSA where the data is. Okay, so this makes this parallel construction kind of easy. They now go out and use what they would consider normal policing procedures and investigation to find the data that would implicate people in a crime, and therefore then substitute that acquired information for the NSA material in the courtroom. And the rules are that when they do this, they're not supposed to tell the court, the judge, or any of the prosecuting or defending attorneys, nor are they to put in writing any affidavit that would implicate or point back to the original evidence, which was the NSA data, to convict these individuals. So what they're basically doing is committing perjury. That means they're going in and lying about the source of data. That denies the defense the opportunity to challenge discovery, which is their constitutional rights.
Because they're able to prove that they've got this information from other sources.
Right. They do it after the fact. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
After they arrest these people. So
I've had that done. I had an experience in federal court many years ago where I brought in a client to give what they call a proffer
Yep.
It's before they come in, they make a proffer. The government says you get all in writing, and they say that none of the things that you tell us during the course of this proffer can be used against you in a later prosecution. So he comes in, you're there, the DEA and the FBI and the local law enforcement are all sitting in on the conversation. Your client comes in, says all these things, and then later, after they've indicted your client, based upon that information, they find other sources to confirm that this is how. Well, no, we didn't use the proffer. We used these other, sources of information to form the basis of our case against your client. It's done in the criminal law context as well, and you're saying that that's what the NSA is using this information for now.
Well, yeah, NSA is collecting the data. FBI and DEA have access to that data, and they're going in searching it for evidence of crimes. And then when they find that, they use that to direct parallel construction, and then they use that evidence to substitute for the NSA data in the courtroom. And they don't tell the courts the original source of the data.
Yeah. Now you joined.
I call that perjury, by the way. That's perjury.
And
in fact, I call this whole program a planned program perjury policy run by the Department of Justice of the United States.
And now going back to your history, you were involved working for the NSA, and you had actually developed a program. What was the name of your code that was used?
Well, it was the overall program was called Thin Thread.
Thin Thread. When did you develop Thin Thread?
We actually, between 1997 and 1999 or 2000, in that period, that was the time when we were doing the main development of it.
Now, Thin Thread was a code that was used to combat terrorism as a counterterrorism type information gathering program.
Well, actually, it did everything that they could possibly want to do in terms of terrorism, money laundering, dope smuggling, any of that. The point was it was going after the digital communications explosion. So the idea was, how could you handle all the information passing across the fiber optic lines anywhere in the world? So if all you had to do is gain access to the fibers, then when you got that, you could basically capture and look at everything going down the fibers and select out of it what you wanted in terms of targets of interest, of like dope smugglers out of Colombia or terrorists either in Colombia and Venezuela area in South America or in Central America or in the Middle East or anywhere in the world. So the point was the idea was to be able to look into everything being communicated and select out through smart selection rules and targeted selection rules that information that was relevant to crimes or relevant to governmental actions or other kinds of threats around the world or potential threats or areas of interest. So the idea was it could look at everything that everybody was doing in the world. And so from that, you selected out, based on the rules and targeting information you had, what was interesting for your analysts to look at.
Now, Thin Thread, at the time that was being used, was it being used to spy on Americans?
No, it wasn't. In fact, all the rules we had in terms of that, if any U.S. citizen was pulled into that data selection process, then we would automatically encrypt all the attributes of that person so that no one would have any idea who it was. We would just know it was a U.S. citizen. Then if from the data we had captured, we could show probable cause that this person was involved in that activity, then we could get a court order, a warrant, to decrypt them and target them.
And so did you get the court orders whenever that happened?
Well, we had it running and showing how it would work, but the NSA never allowed us to do that.
What did the NSA?
That is, it's NSA management, Hayden and Black and Baginski, who were the three main players in this. Yeah. Because
they went to Congress and asked for more money to develop a different kind of system.
Yeah, they had they plus industry, of course, was advocating this too because there was a lot of money to feed on. Once this program came in, industry, it was a boom to industry. Billions went to them. So that was what they were interested in.
But basically what you're saying is during that period of time, there was not a lot of wholesale spying on Americans.
That's correct. Yeah, in fact, it never really, the first indication that I had that they wanted to do that was as a result of the trial of the CEO of Quest. Nacho was his name, I believe. He was the CEO of Quest. He had testified that he was approached on the 28th of February of 2001, a little more than 6 months, I think, before 9/11. And he was being asked by NSA at the time to provide all of his customer data. That meant all U.S. citizens as well as everybody else that he was servicing in his network of Quest. And he refused that because they didn't come with a warrant, right? So he said if you get a warrant, he'll fulfill the warrant. Otherwise, he refused. And so now they sent him to jail. They went back through all the data, found something on him, and went after him for that reason. I don't know if they fabricated evidence. I know they tried to fabricate evidence against me, but I caught them at it. So they failed at that with me. But against him, I guess if they fabricated that evidence, they certainly succeeded because he just recently got out of jail. So that was the first indication. But after 9/11, I mean, it was they had to use the program I was developing to go after it because it was the only one they had that could handle massive amounts of data and do the indexing and things like that of that, so they could do retroactive analysis of anybody in the database that they wanted to. Well, after 9/11, that's when they really started taking in data. My initial knowledge of it was from the AT&T and all of their billing data. So that was the first take. Well, that was like 320 million records of U.S. people calling other U.S. people, not counting any foreigners, just U.S. to U.S., internal, domestic. That was about 320 million records a day. So, but by that program, you could easily put together the social networks of the long-distance callers of everybody in the United States, and then you add the local calls to that, and then you have your entire calling network. So everybody that you communicate with, they now know about. That means that your entire social network is all known to them. That's a violation, in my view, of the First Amendment of the Constitution, which says, you have the right to free association. It doesn't say you have the right to free association as long as NSA knows about it. So that was the part that really got me, and I said, this is an obvious violation of the Constitution, and we need to stop this. So that's when I started. It took me 2.5 weeks to get out of NSA after I found out about that. And then from there on, I'd been working internally in the government to try to get them to change their ways.
Now, tell me what you did, or tell our listeners what you in fact did to get them to change their ways. Because, and once again, a little perspective. Edward Snowden saw this coming on, and he actually left his employment and took documents and actually went to the press and leaked them this way. You took proper channels. Tell us what you did and what response you got.
Well, first of all, you see, people down in the Congress knew who I was. Okay, so I mean, I was the guy who was developing all these programs. I mean, I was involved in the development of most of the one form or another of the programs they're using today. So I didn't expect that I needed to take any documentation with me because my word should have been good enough for them, and they should understand that. That's at least the way I looked at it. So I went directly to the House Intelligence Committee staffer who I knew there, and whom I knew was a strong supporter of the Constitution and the constitutional rights of everyone. So, and doing things legally and properly. And so when I went there, that was Diane Rourke, and she, of course, was on some of the programs with me, and she has been getting public notice recently, too, in some of the testimony she's given. But she obviously understood the dangers of this to our republic and democracy and freedoms, so she took it right to the leaders of the House Intelligence Committee at the time, which were Porter Goss and Nancy Pelosi. And they, of course, basically stonewalled her and delayed her. And finally, I guess Porter Goss told her that she had to go see and talk to Hayden at NSA because he was they expected him to explain it to her.
So basically, both the congressmen that were in charge of this situation just signed off on the fact that the NSA was spying on Americans. They didn't have a problem with it.
That's correct. They were basically, according to even the latest frontline documentation on the 13th of May, I think it was the United States of Secrets, I think was the name of the program. even then, at that time, they basically came out with the fact that only the Gang of Four, and that was the chair and ranking members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees, were briefed on the program in early October of 2001, and that included Porter Goss and Nancy Pelosi, and they agreed to it. So, I mean, I used that as point to that as the reason why Nancy Pelosi would get up when she was Speaker of the House and say impeaching George Bush is off the table. The reason is, of course, at that point, George Bush could have said, hey, if you're going to impeach me, you have to impeach yourself because you're a part of this. You agree to these programs.
Well, exactly. And apparently you're telling us that Obama ought to be impeached, too.
I think they all should have been impeached, every one of them.
Because Obama came in 2008, and despite his promises to the contrary, he's basically continued to implement the same Bush programs, correct?
And increase them too. So because that's in his term, that's when they were building Bluffdale. That's when all of the prison programs started to evolve. All the other programs around the world started to increase, and that's what Snowden's material has been demonstrating. I mean, that's the best evidence. I mean, it's the documentation of the government's documentation of the programs that they're running. So it's hard for them to refute it now. I mean, that's the reason I think Snowden took all that documentation with him, because he saw what happened to us. We went through the proper channels, and we got stepped on by the government. I mean, they came back, sent the FBI at us, threatened us with prosecution, fabricated evidence against us multiple times, and they just tried to put us in jail to get rid of us, to keep us quiet.
Well, you actually were raided by the FBI at gunpoint. Tell us about that.
That's correct. Yeah, they came in. This was in July of 2007. After we'd been, for the better part of 7 years, talking to Congress and various other members, trying to get the government to internally adjust to start to abide by the Constitution, which was their oath of office, by the way. You know, to protect and defend the Constitution is their oath of office. So we thought they would want to do their oath of office, but obviously they didn't. And in fact, they wanted to keep everybody who was making it clear or exposing to sunlight the fact that they weren't fulfilling their oath of office. That's why they sent the FBI at us. To keep us quiet.
You were in
they came in with guns drawn in my house, and I mean, I was coming out of the shower, and there was this guy in my bathroom pointing a gun at me. You know, so that was kind of what is this guy doing here? Was the first thought that went through my mind. You know, so.
And of course, this was after you had already gone to the Department of Defense and complained that the National Security Agency had used this Trailblazer system, much more expensive system for intercepting communications than your system of thin thread. I guess you were met with a basically no response or no good response for that as well, correct?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, all that evidence was covered up by the Department of Defense. I mean, the Department of Defense Inspector General's report was basically put in the back room so that nobody could read it, and they recently released a copy of it to the web so that everybody could see it, but they redacted about 99% of it so that you were looking at blank pages. Basically, here's our report, but from it you could see that they found a lot of corruption at NSA, and my understanding was that two criminal referrals were made by the Department of Defense's Inspector General to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution as a result of that. But those were of course suppressed by I guess the then Attorney General, who was Alberto Gonzales, because you see all of this would have led back to the president. So you've got to cover up everybody. Now the Department of Justice has to cover up for the president and have to cover up for the Senate and House Intelligence Committees, and the committees have to cover up for them. It's everybody covering up for everybody else. That's the reason why it's such a great threat to democracy. They're subverting our constitutional rights. I mean, I always viewed it, if they really wanted to change the Constitution, they should submit an amendment to Congress. Get it circulated around the states to ratify. And if they wanted to drop the First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments to the Constitution, they should say that, not do it in secret. That's what we've got, a covert government down there doing all of this in secret.
We are here with William Binney, the original whistleblower. This is George Yates. I'm your host. This is Justice for All. We're on K-Talk Radio, 1650 AM. We're going to go to a short break. I'm going to come back with Mr. Binney for the next 30 minutes of the show. I'm going to ask him whether or not I have anything to worry about since I've got a show here that's targeting the NSA. I understand that they have they apparently retaliate against anybody that criticizes them. So we'll be back with Mr. Binney in the next 30 minutes. I'm going to ask him just exactly who they're spying on and what they're listening to in our communications. Be right back.
Old Town Tavern in the heart of Phoebus is your place for a great lunch and dinner. Specializing in fresh seafood, burgers, sandwiches, salads, appetizers, and much more. Open daily, Old Town Tavern has live music, pool tables, darts, HD TVs, and a most pleasing atmosphere. Find them on Facebook. Visit 31 East Mellon Street in Hampton with plenty of parking in the back. Call 251-2636, 251-2636, bringing great food and great people together. Old Town Tavern, the locals' choice.
Excellent Italian food is found at Spaghetti Eddie's, a neighborhood restaurant with a great family atmosphere and delicious Italian cuisine. Define Spaghetti Eddie's. New York-style pizza, pasta, subs, calzones, soups, salads will bring you back again and again. Log on to SpaghettiEddiesPizzaCafe.com and visit them at Greenbrier and Western Branch. Quality Italian food is at Spaghetti Eddie's.
The place to go for U.S. rare coins is Newcastle Coins and Collectibles in Chesapeake. They specialize in U.S. and silver and gold coins and provide free verbal offers and are always buying U.S. rare coins. Newcastle Coins and Collectibles, 681 North Battlefield Boulevard in Chesapeake, across from Chesapeake General, open Tuesday through Saturday and always online at NewcastleCollectibles.com. Call 757-609-3633, 757-609-3633 for Newcastle Coins and Collectibles.
Fink's Car Care is your place for all of your automotive needs. They handle state inspections, brakes, tune-ups, oil changes, transmission service, radiator repair. They have a wide variety of tires, and when it comes to your car, they do it all. Visit their two locations at 2711 Victory Boulevard in Portsmouth and 2236 South Military Highway in Chesapeake. For more, log on to finkscarcare.com and call 545-3573.
You are out of order. You're out of order. You're out of order. The whole trial is out of order. They're out of order.
Hi, I'm George Yates. We're here on Justice for All, and my guest, William Binney, the original whistleblower, is here. Bill, listen, I got a question about, I had a guest on my show a few weeks back, a fellow named Chris Simmons, who's a famous spy catcher, interviewed a lot of al-Qaeda terrorists when he was overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. He made an interesting comment where he was saying that the war on terror was essentially over and that it was now a war on poverty and that it was a way of going after the al-Qaeda terrorists. What is your opinion on what is the war on terror over? What is our role, in your opinion, with all of your experience in counterterrorism and intelligence gathering? I guess it's a number of questions I have here. Maybe I'm not sure how to phrase them, but what is the role of the NSA today? What is the role of our counterterrorism experts, in your opinion, going forward, a comprehensive anti-terrorism policy?
Well, I think the problem is that you see they changed their philosophy of acquisition of information back in October of 2001, actually in September, right after 9/11, and they said instead of going after a targeted set of individuals and a zone of suspicion around them in the data flow, they now had the capacity to collect and capture all of it. So they took the option to collect and capture all of it, with the misguided understanding that they thought they could then, from that, figure out what was important in the world and find it and use it to stop terrorism. Well, the problem with that is that when you do that, it's like if you go onto your internet and you do a Google search, you put in search terms or phrases or so on, and you hit the return, you get tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of returns. And so if you think of that as the daily input that they get from this bulk acquisition of information around the world, then what it means is you have to look at that kind of output of data every day. Well, you cannot get through it. It's impossible for you to get through that amount of data. No human could do that. So what that does then is makes them dysfunctional. That means they can't. That's an impediment to success. That doesn't help them succeed. That's been my problem with them all along. That's why I was devising ThinThread, which was to do a focused, concentrated attack on zones of suspicion around known terrorists, so that you would have a rich environment for your analysts to figure things out and stop terrorist attacks before they even get started.
You've made a comment that if ThinThread had been used properly instead of Trailblazer, which is the more expensive government program they chose, that we could have prevented the attack on 9/11.
Yes, that's right. Because all of the data, I mean, there were like seven calls from the two terrorists who came into San Diego back to the Yemen facility, which was targeted all along. There were 7 calls before 9/11 that were in their databases that they couldn't find. Well, the idea behind ThinThread was that it would manage that, recognize that as a target, and push it right out to everybody who needed to know, not just at NSA, but in FBI and everywhere else. So that FBI would have been automatically notified that these people were in San Diego, exactly where the phone was that they were using, and they could have targeted them at that point. But more importantly, you could have picked them up on the manifest for incoming people on the airlines, too. And they didn't do that either, in spite of the fact that the Malaysians had notified us that they were coming in. So, the point was they were depending on people to manage the acquisition and recognition of this data, and that doesn't work well at all, especially when you have massive amounts of data.
Well, now isn't it even bigger now? I mean, what is it?
Yes.
There's 1 million square feet of space that they've got in Utah that's of hardware that's just storing these massive amounts of data. How in the world can anybody sort through all that data and find anything meaningful?
Well, that's the point. They can't. It makes it so difficult for people to succeed. That's why the White House had issued their big data initiative. It's called the White House Big Data Initiative, which is a request for industry to come up with algorithms that can go through massive amounts of data to figure out what's important in that data, so that people don't have to do it. Because what it is a basic recognition that the process that they've started down, the path they've taken, is not working because people can't get through all the data that they're capturing. So that means that from that they are now beginning to recognize the problem with the path they've taken. The other problem with the path that they have not openly recognized yet is it is a totalitarian process that they've adopted, which in effect is destroying our democracy through the parallel construction through the whole judicial system. Also, the IRS is a part of that too. By the way, they look at all the NSA data too. That gives them some view into all the networks of people who are cooperating together in any effort, like the Tea Party, the Occupy group, or any other religious group that wants to get politically active. They can see who they're involved with, and they can use that information to create questions or problems for people trying to get 501c3, like they're doing, right? So this is the kind
and Amnesty International tried to sue, and the Supreme Court said that they don't have standing because because you don't know that you're being spied on. Nobody can sue the government because they don't have the information to prove they're being spied on. It's I guess a catch-22. You want to call it that?
Well, yes, but also the Solicitor General in that particular case, Amnesty International versus Clapper.
Right.
The Solicitor General lied to the Supreme Court to get it thrown out of court.
Exactly. He said that we weren't being spied on, and he was lying.
He also said that if any data that was captured by NSA was used to arrest people, that the defendant would be told so that they could, according to their rights, challenge discovery. Now, that was a lie.
Right.
They had used it on hundreds of cases every year since 9/11. I mean, that's why Thomas Tam, in 2003, when he came across evidence of them doing exactly that, that's why he went to the New York Times and told them about it.
Well, as a practical matter, how many of us are actually being spied on at any one time? I mean, the they came on. I mean, the government, the NSA, I guess it was Clapper and some others came on and said, "Oh, it's all just metadata. We're not actually looking at what's inside those transmissions. We know that that's a lie."
Yep.
So at what point? Because I think a lot of us are just saying, well, they're not probably looking at my emails. They're not looking at my phone calls. But they could be. And so where do they draw the line? Are you saying then that local DEA, let's say, or FBI might have let's say, a target of interest and then go to the NSA and say, gee, we'd like to look at this person's emails and phone transmissions, and the NSA will just say okay? Or how does that work in your opinion?
I think it works just basically like this. If local law enforcement said they had would ask the FBI for any information they would have against a certain person, that would be passed to certain sections of the FBI or the Department of the DEA, the Department of the Drug Enforcement Administration,
right?
And that would get passed down in the Drug Administration down to the SOD, the Special Operations Division,
right?
And the Special Operations Division has members of FBI, CIA, NSA, DHS, IRS, and others, and they would then go into the databases that NSA has created. And with one query, get all emails or all records of phone calls that were used or that are in the database about that individual.
So these databases then are all cross-referenced. They're available to just about anybody that's in law enforcement. They use, I guess, some sort of a joint task force, if you will.
Right.
And they'll get local law enforcement. They'll get DEA. They'll get FBI, Homeland Security, these other agencies, and they'll all kind of work together, and they'll use this. And they put it all in one database. So it's really hard to say where one agency's information and another agency's information overlap, right?
Yes, that's right. But they do correlate it all. And the problem is that when you do that, you're going into a base of data that is information on every citizen of the United States. If you use an electronic device or leave an electronic footprint, like with your credit cards, or you use your cell phones, you move around with your smartphones, you have a GPS on you, they can take samples of that every so often, so they can watch you move around, or any kind of banking transactions or any kind of emails, phone calls, all that data is there. That's what they scan then. They go in looking for, that's what the normal process for DHS. If you remember a while back, maybe half a year ago or so, the DHS published a list of words that they were looking for in text, in messages that they were sending. This is their search term list.
Right.
So these are the terms they look for in the emails you send back and forth, or the files and transfers that you send back and forth, or if they're transcribing your phone calls, which are mostly a good deal of them are all recorded, if not transcribed. That's why Tim Clementi, that ex-FBI agent, could say on CNN right after the bombing in Boston that the FBI was looking into the phone call that was made by one of the Tsarnaev brothers to his wife prior to the bombing, and they said that if the wife didn't tell them the truth, they had a way of getting back to what was said on that phone call. And the reason they had that is because a percentage of it is recorded.
Are you saying that if I leave the studio here today and I go call my producer and make a phone call to him, that's going to be a recorded phone call?
There's a high probability of that. I mean, they don't transcribe all phone calls. I mean, I estimated the internal domestic phone call volume to be something on the order of 3 billion calls a day.
And do they target individuals, or is it just you're saying that there is currently the capacity, the technological capacity with hardware and software to record every telephone conversation and email in the country at all times?
It's a significant percentage, probably in the order of somewhere between 60 and 80%. Yeah, it's done by the program called Fairview. If you go on the web and do a query for Fairview NSA, you'll get the slides that will show you all the fiber optic tap points in the United States, and there's like between 80 and 100 of those fiber optic tap points inside the United States, distributed across that's the lower 48 states.
Well, doesn't the government have to have a wiretap? Don't they have to have a warrant before they can actually listen in on my phone conversation with someone that I make?
Well, they're supposed to, yeah, but they haven't been abiding by that since 9/11.
When did that change? I think at what you're saying that this occurred right after 9/11. The policy changed.
Yeah, the policy on a grand scale changed at that point. Yeah, they just basically started spying on everybody and paid no attention to the law or the Constitution.
Now, the Fourth Amendment, of course, allows us to be secure in our homes from the government coming into our homes. And I do know that there's a difference between cell phone communications and landline communications. Cell phones are radio phones, and there's a less of an expectation of privacy. When we're talking about whether or not these are constitutional intrusions, I think that we get into what is an expectation of privacy. Recently, the Supreme Court just ruled this week that cell phones are protected. That when you're arrested, the police can't just come seize your cell phone and look at it. That was a pretty significant Supreme Court decision. Actually, a little surprising in light of some of the decisions of this Supreme Court. But I guess they have. I guess the Supreme Court justices have cell phones too, and they don't want them looked at.
Yes, that's right. And plus, of course, we have some inroads in passing, trying to educate people in the court so that they understand the rulings that they're making when it comes to technology. Right now, I think even they would admit that they don't really have a good understanding yet as to how they should apply the Constitution or the laws. So we've been, our little group of ex-NSA whistleblowers have gotten to the point where we have some input to try to help them understand the technology so they can better apply the law and the Constitution. So hopefully that we can continue to do that, and we'll educate everybody to where they can make smart decisions. We're even trying to do this with the Congress, so because they're passing laws about this, they should at least understand it before they pass a law,
Well, tell us a little bit about that. I know that I read a little biography about you, and the government came in, they raided your house, they, as you say, planted evidence or made up evidence against you. They shut down your business after you left the NSA in 2001, so it's been 13 years. Tell us what you've been doing to use your skills in order to further your goals.
Well, we've been since the raid. I mean, they shut us down. Then we lawyered up, and the lawyers, of course, told us to be quiet, don't talk to anybody, take a low profile, so that you they won't look at you and use that evidence against you or try to use it to help create another charge. So you
were never indicted.
No, I never was.
You were never charged with any crimes.
No, I was not. No.
Were any of your colleagues ever charged with any crimes?
Only Tom Drake was. Right. He was charged with 10 counts, five counts with having classified data, and so they were charging him with the 1917 Espionage Act, like it was he was doing this for a foreign power, and so. But what they did was their whole case eventually fell apart because that was fabricated evidence, and it was fabricated simply by they went into his house, took papers out that were clearly marked unclassified, and then so they drew a line through that and then classified him and said he had classified material. So therefore, they charged him with having classified material. So it was like retroactively classifying things so they could charge him with having classified material. So they were fabricating the evidence. Well, they got caught at that, too. And so the judge was given that information, Judge Bennett up in the federal court in Baltimore. He was given that evidence, and he knew they were fabricating evidence against him. So, their case just absolutely fell apart, and they were desperate for him to plead just something so they could get that case out of court, not have to go to court and eat a lot of crow and be charged with malicious prosecution in the process. So they eventually said, well, how about you plead to the case of misusing a computer? Like, did you ever use a computer to maybe look at something that wasn't business related? If you did, well, that's really misuse of the computer. So that's what he pled to, because it ended the whole thing for him. It was over at that point, you see. Otherwise, they could keep dragging it on and on and on.
And they had to prove that they won, that they got something out of it.
They got something, yeah. And so that's the most that they would get. I mean, they were desperate toward the end to get him. They made like 4 or 5 different offers to him, and he refused every one because he called me and asked me about it. I told him, I said, Tom, you have to live with anything you do here. And if you plead to something you didn't do, you're going to have to live with that, and so is your family. So if I were you, I would never plead guilty to anything that you did not do. Period. Just don't do that. And that's what he would not do. Well, and so when they posed that thing about misusing a computer, well, I mean, that means that if you looked at anything that wasn't business related in any way, that could be used as a way of convicting you of a misdemeanor, which is what that eventually happened.
Well, you look long enough and hard enough in the federal criminal code. I think probably everybody's breaking a criminal law in the federal criminal code every day. The way
that's
it's
right.
written.
That's right. But it shows you the extent to which our government is corrupting itself and subverting. I mean, I call this is truly treason to the Constitution of this country. This is really treason to the basic foundation of this country.
It's completely foreign to all of our ideas of privacy.
Yes. I mean, I would also say that when the FISA court issued that warrant to Verizon, the one that was published from Snowden, that showed that they were ordered to transfer all the data of all their customers. So if you read in the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, it requires the warrant to specifically state who you're going after, where you're going after it, and what data you're looking for. But that was a general warrant that was issued on the over 110 million customers of the Verizon company.
Which is exactly what the Founding Fathers wanted the Fourth Amendment to address.
That's one of the main reasons we had a revolution here.
Right, the general
warrants.
We called
it writs of assistance back then is what they were called.
Right.
Yep.
It just seems like every show I get into these issues, and I never thought myself as a constitutional scholar, but my engineer is sitting here, and he looks at me and goes, "Man, I'm learning a lot more about the Constitution every week." So,
well, I think we all need to, because these people are destroying our democracy, and I looked at it this way: anybody who's an incumbent, we the electorate should fire, because they got us to this point.
Well, it looks like everyone in Congress has signed off on this because it's politically correct. What's kind of striking about this is that the majority of Americans, I guess, have just gotten so numb to this, they think it's okay. I mean, we give away our privacy on Facebook. We've watched so many TV movies that we know that we can have our credit card receipts tracked. We know that our phone calls can be tracked just because they're cell phones. We're already told that we have no reasonable expectation of privacy in our cell phones. We know that we have GPSs on our little iPhones, and we know we can be tracked. So at some point, I think people have just said, we know that there's cameras out in the streets and in every store we walk in. So there's just this continuing encroachment on our privacy to the point now where people are saying, well, gee, it's just one more thing, might as well listen in on my conversations too, because everything else about me is being observed. And but this is it's going too far to say that you can actually listen to my phone call, you're going to actually read my emails, and you're not going to get a warrant specifically authorizing that. What is your what is your title now, if you will? Do you have an organization now that you're a member of, and who are you associated with now? You say you're using the term "we," and you're doing. What's your current project right now, and how is that going?
Well, I'm supporting the exposefacts.org, which is a group in D.C. that's formed up to try to set up a method for whistleblowers to get the word out and yet maintain anonymity for them, so that they have a way of getting the public aware of certain issues, like for example, the Veterans Administration problem or other intelligence problems, how they're violating your constitutional rights there. So it's an organization of reporters and lawyers and ex-intelligence agencies, as well as other kinds of agencies in the government, people who are whistleblowers or have experienced this problem that occurs with the government when they deal with whistleblowing. I mean, the point is that whistleblowers raise up genuine issues, and instead of dealing with the issue, the government steps on them everywhere you look. This is also true in industry. Well, it's like you're dealing with an alcoholic that won't recognize they're an alcoholic. Well, if you have that, and that's the way you let it continue to proceed, then they'll never solve their problem and they'll never get better. And that's basically the way it's been running since I've been involved with it. So,
well, how in the world can anybody be a whistleblower when they take a look at your example? I mean, what would you say to other whistleblowers that did what you did? Keep going and subject yourself to scrutiny, to having your businesses shut down, to having to incur thousands of dollars in legal fees and have your reputation trashed, and when all you're trying to do is the right thing. What's the balance here, Bill?
Right up till now, there's pretty much no balance at all. But that's why this exposefacts.org organization has put together this website and also this organization to try to help whistleblowers maintain their anonymity.
How do they do that? How do they maintain their anonymity and still have any credibility to expose a practice?
Well, there's different ways you can use. For example, we've published names and people involved so that they're available to anybody who wants to become a whistleblower, so that you don't have to. You can use kind of covert ways of getting to us, like use a public telephone somewhere, and then just to make contact, then do like Deep Throat did, the deputy FBI of the FBI when he was passing out information on President Nixon and his activities.
Right.
You could have meetings in underground parking lots where you can't be seen. Things like that.
So you're making it possible then. Let's say somebody is a potential whistleblower either in government or industry, and they will then, rather than just go public with it and face retaliation from the government or industry, they come to your organization, and then you find a way to make that information public without them being known?
Yes. And
you use your own parallel information. Right. You use the government's tactics.
Right. But one of the things also is you need to get a lawyer first. If you're planning on becoming a whistleblower, one of the first things you should do is get legal advice. There are organizations who can do that. Whistleblower.org. You can go there. You can go to the Government Accountability Project. There's other whistleblowing organizations. If you use, go on the web and look them up. But the problem is if you use Google, that query, of course, will go to the government, and if they see you looking for a whistleblower site,
Oh, my God.
So that kind of thing.
It's scary.
It's the idea. You have to be aware of what's going on and what can be done.
So how do you contact whistleblower.org without them knowing about you?
The best way to do is with a public telephone, I would think, would be the most reliable one, and never use the same public telephone again.
God, this sounds like something out of Breaking Bad.
Exactly. Actually, it's becoming more like Minority Report.
Well, this has been a fascinating show. Is there anything that I know that we've talked and we just rambled along here? It's been a great show. I wish I had another hour. Anything else you'd like to say that I haven't touched on? I know you've got a lot to say, but
I would just like to pass on to your listeners that you have to, as the electorate of this country, have to stand up and start objecting to the procedures that our government are doing, especially when it comes to looking at U.S. citizens. I mean, when Senator Wyden asked the director of NSA how many U.S. citizens are in their databases, they refused to answer and told him back in writing that if they did that, it would be a violation of the privacy rights of U.S. citizens. Well, I mean, so I would tell him verbally or even in writing that there are between 280 and 300 million U.S. citizens in the databases of NSA in there several hundred times, or several thousands of times, each of them. So, I mean, you have to start standing up for and getting the government and telling your representatives and senators, if they don't vote this to stop this activity, that you're going to fire them in the next election. That that's the way to do it. You not threaten them with a vote to get rid of them.
Well, interesting. The whole Tea Party movement, which whether you're a liberal or a conservative, so many of the Tea Party people, which you may agree or not with some of their positions, but this whole fear of government, sometimes the idea that you're just, as the government says, just trust me. And this kind of dovetails a lot with so much of what's going on. And that's the interesting thing about the Tea Party is there's people on the left and on the right that are finding themselves Tea Partiers. They might not agree on all the issues, but they do all agree that they cannot always trust the government to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So this has been a fascinating show. Listen, Mr. Binney, I really appreciate you coming on with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
And hopefully this will educate some people out there to do exactly what you said and confront their congressmen and their elected representative and their friends and family and say, hey, this is wrong. We don't like to be spied on. Let's do something about it. This has been Justice for All. George Yates. We'll be back here again next Saturday from 2 to 3. And we hope you go enjoy this beautiful Saturday afternoon. And we'll see you later.